Hey, athletes. Dr. Page here. Just wanted to pop on and, talk about sports performance worst case scenarios and how within our subconscious programming or the functioning of our nervous system, we actually create, when the pressure is on, the potential for injuries to reoccur, failures or poor playing to happen again, as well as anything that we actually know could happen to another athlete or we've seen happen within the sport. And the worst case scenarios are typically, life and death ones, right? So when we talk about like extreme sports and stuff, you can land wrong, even gymnastics, you could land wrong and break your neck or crack your head and die, right? So these are survival responses within us that we are trained in primitively within our nervous system to keep us safe. However, they don't necessarily assist us in performing optimally unless we actually do the work to reset our nervous system based off of the past performance worst case scenarios, failures, injuries, poor playing. So what that means is that we have two ends of our nervous system. We have the top end, it's the sympathetic nervous system. And so that's going to be our fight, flight, freeze, high brain beta wave. Then we have another end, the parasympathetic nervous system state. And that's our rest and recovery. And we can't perform in parasympathetic, but we want to be able to drop into parasympathetic when we're sleeping, when we're resting, and essentially to drop into REM sleep so that we're actually having dreams, which are really important for us to play out and process emotions each day. But what begins to happen is that from any negative experience, life or sports, but very specifically, we're talking about sports here, our nervous system actually freezes for a moment. We can't really process it. We take in experiences very quickly and consolidate the memory based off of past experiences and the similarity to the current experience from the past experience. And what happens is it's about as much information as an encyclopedia at every given second within the day that we're consolidating and making memory around. So our nervous system will reset, and it's called our homeostasis, our way of being all the time, our heart rate, how we're functioning, the alertness of our nervous system. We will reset to a more sympathetic nervous system dominance every time we endure something that's negative or a trauma or something that doesn't serve us. And even more so when we're young, we have known now that we don't really make beta wave, so we don't really go into that high brain wave of being able to even make sense of things. Instead, we just freeze below the ages of about 7 to 12. So if we start playing a sport when we're really young, we're actually freezing in negative experiences within our nervous system. And that's ramping up our nervous system to reset that homeostasis to more of that fight, flight, freeze response. So when the pressure to perform is on, we actually subconsciously go back through all of the negative experiences when we're calling for cortisol to perform optimally, right? We need a little bit of cortisol, that inflammatory hormone. It's like making us awake. It's the adrenaline feeling. And so our body will perceive very subconsciously, not within our conscious awareness, that something negative is going to occur when we're performing. And so we will go through all of these negative experiences to prepare on a primitive level ourselves for that negative thing to happen again. And we call this the trauma memory network. So what then happens is that we are unable to access our fine-tuned motor skills and that flow state or alpha brainwave, which sits in the middle between the beta high down the theta parasympathetic. And that's where we want to be in flow state. But instead, when we're calling for that cortisol, that adrenaline to perform, and we are even consciously potentially concerned that negative things are going to occur, and then our subconscious, our brain and body knowing what has happened in the past, we then go into that trauma response of the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, essentially, and we will not be able to perform optimally. So when we know the worst case scenario or have seen another athlete get injured or know what a really bad outcome could be, we've actually laid down memory network and ramped up our nervous system to that maladaptive homeostasis of activation, sympathetic nervous system state, high beta wave, fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And so when we're out there trying to do our best, we'll actually not perform well at all, especially if an athlete right in front of us gets hurt. So I had a client at one point in time, a US ski teamer, whom an athlete right before him at one of his first World Cups of the season crashed and hit his head and was unconscious. And then my client actually then went and he messed up in his competition and broke his collarbone. So, and it was freestyle mogul, so you're doing flips. And so his mechanics broke down. So his fine-tuned motor skills within and around that alpha flow state was not accessible because he'd seen someone else get hurt. So it ramped up his nervous system because we lay down that memory network based off of what we've seen happen to another athlete or individual in life. We call mirror neurons, and they're a protection mechanism also. And our eyes are our first line of defense. So when we see something negative happen, our nervous system right away gets on guard and is preparing for that negative thing to happen to us. So what we can do about it, though, is we must drop into the altered state. So that subconscious plane that is the alpha flow state, and go back through each negative experience and fully reprocess it and access where we're holding on to that undischarged shock on the nervous system, that freeze. So that then when we're ready to compete, we no longer have this whole trauma memory network getting activated. As well as we can prepare by going through the worst case scenario of the competition. So for instance, we have the Olympics going on. So we know that we have our athletes, like our gymnasts and so on, doing a very specific set of skills to gain points to place, right? So we can go through each one of those set of skills and say, okay, well, what's the worst case scenario or the worst thing that can happen while you're competing? Or potentially what have been the negative things? But typically when we work and do this work, we start all the way from like age 4, all the way through of all the negative things, all the poor performances, even if it's a different sport, because it's still the nervous system will reset and ramp up, even if it's not the same sport. And then we go into, okay, so these are the specific skills. What are the worst things that can happen? What have you seen happen to other athletes that created a poor performance or a negative outcome? So we're able to drop into the subconscious state. We use sounds to do that. And we go back through these negative experiences and then the worst case scenario. And then that allows for our nervous system to reset to a calmer state. So it sits right at the alpha flow state. So you're maintain and stay in flow when you're out there competing. So this is how past negative performances, failures, even life adversities, and the potential of the negative things that can happen could inhibit your sports performance right here in the now. Same thing with like baseball players, right? So it's a very skilled, precise sport too when you're a pitcher, thrower, batter, whatever that looks like, catcher. So it's all the negative things that have occurred in a game, all the little small mistakes, and then all the small mistakes that you can make. So very easily, we drop into the altered state. It's called alpha imprinting. We access where we feel things in our body, and we fully discharge them. Any emotions or belief systems that were held around that. We reset the homeostasis, and then you're back into your optimal flow state. And I've seen this in about 12 sessions is what I work with athletes on and getting them optimized again. But yeah, so we can actually prevent all that from happening. It's just essentially deconditioning the nervous system around these things and then desensitizing the worst case scenario. So yeah, if you're interested in learning more about alpha imprinting, comment alpha in the comments and we'll book you a 30-minute session to see if you're a good candidate. Thanks.